So on August 17th, the Los Angeles based digital media company Jubilee published the latest in their Surrounded series. And that video is called One Black Radical versus 20 Black Conservatives, featuring actress, comedian, and Black radical Amanda Seales. Now, if you don't know who Amanda Seales is, she is best known for her role as Tiffany Dubois in Insecure, which was a show on HBO with Issa Rae. But she also goes by the stage name Amanda Diva as a DJ, and she had a comedy show on HBO called I Be Knowing in 2019. Now, a couple of FYIs here. Jubilee Media, they have this YouTube channel, and the CEO, Jason Y. Lee, he tries to leverage this to encourage political discourse. That's the whole reason he started this thing. Part of what Jubilee Media has is this show called Surrounded. Now, the whole concept of Surrounded is to take one notable person with a distinct view of politics, society, um, sports, religion, whatever it is, and to have them debate 20 people with an opposing view to theirs. Now, they've been doing Surrounded since 2024. The debates are in 20-minute increments. And by the way, when there is a debate going on, the other 19 people who are sitting in that circle, so they are literally sitting in a circle surrounding the person with the specific point of view and the person that they're debating. And the other 19 can indicate that they've heard enough from their peer by raising red flags. And the peer stops. And what has to happen is that more than half of the red flags have to go up, right? So that's just an FYI on how they do this thing. And there are fact checks that are done as the debate goes on. They put the fact checks on the screen. The one notable debater who comes in and they challenge the 20 people, what they do is they pose a series of claims. Amanda Seales posed 4 claims. I don't know if this is standard. I've only watched the one Surrounded episode with Seales. And so they have 4 claims that their opponents are going to try to debunk. Now, Amanda Seales, 4 claims in the episode that she did. One was reparations are undeniably just and necessary. Claim number 2, black on black crime is a result of underinvestment and over-policing. Claim number 3, systemic racism isn't just a theory, it's backed by data and history. And then claim number 4, black conservatism fails to meet the needs of the working class. So these 20 people all got an opportunity. Well, not all, but they got an opportunity to debate her. Now, it's not all 20 people, everyone getting a chance to do it. Whoever wants to debate her can run to the seat. Now, they literally run to the seat so that they can debate her. And so it's a race. They have to race to the seat to get there. Um, one reason to watch this video is because there was one cat in a red hat who could never get to the, I mean, he never got to the seat. And he was probably one of the closest people and one of the tallest people. That was the funniest thing to me. Like, he could take 3 steps and get to this seat, but I don't know, I guess he was kind of passive and everybody just boxed him out. It was really interesting. So here's another FYI item for you. And this about Amanda Seales. Now, Amanda Seales has 2 degrees. One is from Purchase College, all right, State University of New York, Purchase in New York. And she has her master's in African American studies with a concentration in hip hop from Columbia University. So Amanda Seales is very intelligent, very. I mean, sister has a brain, all right. At the same time, though, she does not shy away from controversy. Like, if she has it on her mind, she's going to say it. And so she describes herself in that vein as a disruptor. Now, the other thing to note, especially in the context of this particular episode, is that she does not describe herself as a liberal. She describes herself as a black radical. We'll come back to that again. So, my overview of this thing and how this debate went is this: it was maddening to listen to, quite frankly, at parts, but I did like it. Um, Seals, I thought, did a really good job of laying the groundwork for how this thing is going to go. She laid out expectations, and she was really good at kind of policing the moment most of the time. So one thing she made very clear, knowing that this, there were some hot button issues on the table, there were conservatives. She made it very clear that she wasn't going to go for all that interrupting and talking over and all that good stuff. Now she did do it sometimes, but she knew what she was walking into, and so she made sure she laid that groundwork. And I have to say, overall, my impression is that it was good to see Black folks exchange ideas, even if I didn't agree with a lot of the ideas, but I thought it was fascinating to do this along the lines of Black radicalism and conservative views, specifically from Black folks. Um, Seals herself is somebody who, honestly, I think a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with her. And she seems to be just fine with that. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that's what she prefers. But she is someone who I think has this attitude: you can take her or leave her. And yes, you will log on to social media, see some videos, she's going to say something, and you may look at it and listen to it and go, what is going on with this sister? But then you may listen to it and say, oh yeah, she's dead on. And so she's very aware of herself, and she's very aware of her views, and she's pretty specific about her views. So with that being said, I want to go over what I thought were some of the highlights and the lowlights of this thing. The list of lowlights is pretty long. I'm not even going to lie. Okay, so here we go. Here we go. Not even 2 minutes into this thing, this cat named Anthony sits down, and he starts off by saying, how many years has it been since slavery? 150 years. Not even 2 minutes in, this is what we get. And this is on her first claim about reparations. That's what he was responding to. Now, later, this same cat came back. He got back to the chair, and he said, blacks want handouts. The funniest thing to me overall about these Black conservatives is to hear most of them talk about Black folks as if Black folks are some other group of people. That was the funniest thing to me. But one of the lowlights was this man within the first 2 minutes talking about slavery, like it all ended. uh, like first of all, for him to even get this whole thing about how many years since slavery, 150 years. Well, I don't know if he realizes that slavery started way before 150 years, and she did correct him on that, by the way, later on. So then we get this other cat, Matt Nuclear is what he calls himself. I don't know if his last name is really Nuclear. Really young kid. I shouldn't say kid, but really young. He looked like he was either in his early or mid 20s, could be late 20s. And the subject of Black on Black crime came up. I think he brought up Black on Black crime. And he said, the one thing I have learned to hate: stats don't lie. Now, Seals responded to him immediately, stats do lie. And I agree with her, because people lie and people create stats. Also, poor Matt said there's no more racism, and he doesn't believe that redlining exists. I really think, now she patronized him, but I really do think that with him, his youth is a big problem on top of his conservative views. Then this other guy comes up, Jordan. Now, Jordan was the one who I probably actually disliked out of all of them. Because I can't say that I really disliked most of them. but Jordan was dislikable, very dislikable. He started off by telling her conservatives believe in hard work, liberals don't believe in hard work. Now, she went ahead and corrected him and told him she's not a liberal, she's a black radical. He didn't know the difference. And then he goes on to say white supremacy is a lie, and then went on to say black culture is toxic. So, yeah, this is where we were within the first, I want to say, 10 minutes of this thing. And then black on black crime, that claim came up. This guy named Austin said that bad decision making is what leads to absenteeism among fathers. The sister named Jazz came up, and I actually felt kind of bad for Jazz because I'm going to come back to this in a little bit, but she did disclose that she had suffered some personal trauma in her life. And I think a lot of her opinion was built on that. But she said black people stay in victimhood. We had the people who opposed DEI, and I'm going to get to my issues with black conservatives and DEI in just a little bit. That is honestly just a pain, it's just a pain. But um, this was the funniest thing I think I heard anybody say among the black conservatives when Seals challenged him directly and asked him, "Do you even know what DEI is?" The man said, quote, "I've researched things. I've looked at different clips." Now, here's another one who seemed youngish. I mean, probably late 20s, early 30s, something like that. And then the biggest thing among the lowlights, the oversimplification of issues harming black folks. So here's what I think contribute to this. And by the way, this is the way forward. I'm Eddie Francis, and I'm talking about the Jubilee YouTube episode of Surrounded that featured Amanda Seals, and it was one black radical versus 20 black conservatives. And after listening to these folks, it became a lot clearer to me what the issues are with black conservatives and what seems to drive some of their beliefs. And the first thing that hit me really hard in listening to them is how they romanticize other cultures, ethnicities, and nationalities. Matt, in particular, the young cat, seems just obsessed with Asian culture, which is not unusual among black kids and young black folks. That is not unusual at all. I have met quite a few young black folks who are into K-pop. They love all things Asian. Actually, my son is not much different when it comes to his appreciation for Asian culture. And listen, there are a lot of people from other ethnicities who I'm sure are enamored with Asian culture. But Matt, part of what contributed to the lowlights for me is that he just obsessed about how much quote unquote better I believe he sees Asians than black folks. And as I just brought up, another thing that I think contributed to the lowlights of this thing, the oversimplification of black existence and black struggle. These folks have no concept of why. They have no concept. Why is black on black crime amplified as a major public safety issue in America? They don't seem to want to ask that question. They seem to rest on this is the problem and we are the problem and we need to fix ourselves. And it's interesting because I think Seals, if I remember correctly, I think Seals at one point tried to redirect to, well, what about issues happening in other communities? And they just weren't having it. They weren't hearing it. They're not, the issue of black folks in prison came up. They're not asking why there are so many black folks in prison. And when you give them an answer that they don't like, they pretty much stop you in your tracks and tell you that you don't know what you're talking about. And so it goes right back to, honestly, black folks are inferior. That's what I hear. There's no concept of restorative justice. They don't know what restorative justice is. They don't understand what restorative practices are, because that was the foundation of Seal's argument about reparations. And then at one point, someone got obsessed about money. Well, who's going to get the money? And so Seals stop. She kind of stops the show and goes, wait. You're talking about remuneration. I'm talking about reparations. Those are two different things. Do you know what remuneration is? Every time she asked them to define something, they couldn't do it, and they refused to do it. Then there's this failure among these black conservatives, the failure to understand the rationale of social programs and social movements. The failure to understand that the reason something like affirmative action even exists in the first place is unethical practices by racists. They can't get that. Somebody started railing against race-based admissions. Well, we wouldn't need race-based admissions if people had been doing what they were supposed to be doing in the first place and acting civil in the first place. And judging people by the content of their character. Somebody brought, of course, somebody had to go ahead and quote Martin Luther King Jr., right? But see, the thing that they don't understand is that the reason we have these social programs and movements is because people were not judging people by the content of their character, which is why King has even said it in the first place. And then they associate, when they think of black culture, I noticed that most of these folks really prided themselves, it seems, on their elocution and articulation. Good for you. I'm all for it. I'm all about it. They associate a lack of it, and they associate somebody living out loud in their blackness. So, like an Amanda Seals, Jasmine Crockett, I think would be another example. They associate that with a lack of intelligence. Clearly, none of these people have heard the song by War, Why Can't We Be Friends? Just because I don't talk right doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. And what they do is they get obsessed about pop culture, what's happening specifically in pop culture. And they can't contextualize that pop culture is a specific area in society. The issue of music came up. Seals challenged them and asked, who distributes the music? Who distributes the entertainment? Who distributes the media? Now, I do think that there was a fair counter that they gave in saying, well, who's consuming it? I think that's fair. You may disagree with me, and I understand why you would, but I do think that's a fair counter. But at the same time, they need to answer that question. Who is distributing this stuff? Let me tell you, on that issue specifically, as somebody who used to work in music radio, I watched firsthand how this worked. And basically, the way it works is that the people who are distributing this stuff, they ram it down radio's throat, and then radio rams it down the listener's throat. Music radio. That's how I saw it happening. And one day I said, well, shoot, if these people wanted to ram polka music down our throats, instead of gangster rap, they could do it. I said this in the 90s when I was in my 20s, sitting there listening to music radio. The other thing that I thought really contributed to the lowlights is they kept referring to Seals as a liberal. I can understand that. The problem is that after the first couple of times she said, I'm not a liberal, they would not hear it. And that was very disrespectful. They also had no concept of moving the goalpost in public policy. They don't get it. They don't seem to think that white politicians are capable of cheating. They don't seem to think they don't seem to think that at all. No concept of numbers being a lie or how data are manipulated. No concept. They don't seem to understand that people create data. So data can, in fact, lie because people lie. So people lie with numbers. And then the final issue that I have, and the thing that I think really contributed to the lowlights of this, conservatives seem to have everything come back to me. It's about me and it's about what I want. What is this election going to do for me personally? For example, I want to come back to Jazz, who I mentioned had experienced some personal trauma. You know, it was hard to listen to because you could hear the pain in her voice about what she went through. Her view of black folks is based on her trauma with what happened. She lost people to violence and black folks did it. And so she is judging the behaviors and the state of black folks and everything. She's basing it all on what happened to her. Now that's a normal human behavior. I absolutely got to acknowledge that. But it's still this thing where it just comes back to me. And she was just in line. She was in line with that, unfortunately. Now, believe it or not, I do believe that there are some highlights. And I went through a really long list of lowlights, but there were some highlights. You're listening to The Way Forward. I'm Eddie Francis, and we are talking about, or at least I'm talking about, one black radical versus 20 black conservatives. The video that was posted by Jubilee on their show Surrounded, on their YouTube show Surrounded. And Amanda Seals debated 20 black conservatives. And yeah, there were a lot of lowlights, but here were the highlights. And here's where I was really encouraged. And here's why I say that even with all of the lowlights, this was actually a good thing. And it could be great for black folks if we take the ball and run the right way. But the thing that I really liked is, number one, the fact that I think Amanda Seals was the right one for this, to debate 20 black conservatives. I don't think there was a need for a black liberal to do it. I do like the idea that there was a black radical person doing it. And with someone who was a radical doing it, there was less fear and there was less apology. There was more fight. And I think that was a huge highlight of this, because I think these people needed to be fought. With that being said, even when things got chippy with most of the debaters, there was some respect shown. Now, a lot of people watching it may not necessarily see it that way, but there was. If you're familiar with the way a lot of these political debates and social debates go now, a lot of it is people going at each other's throats. It's a whole lot of I said what I said. And I'm right, you're wrong. There's no possible way you could be right because I'm the one who's right. And so since I'm right, you have to be wrong. So there's a whole lot of, since I'm winning, you have to lose. Since you're winning, I refuse to lose. And so there's a lot of that. With that being said, there were several people who were willing to hear Seals out, even in their disagreement, including this one cat named Joshua from New Orleans. Like, Joshua is from New Orleans, living in Los Angeles, because these things happen in Los Angeles. And he wanted to challenge her, but when he heard her, he was quite okay with saying, "Oh, okay, I hear what you're saying." And for the record, I don't think Joshua was a conservative. Um, so, but I was also encouraged that there were two debaters. I can't remember how to pronounce her name. Kytia, Kytia, I think is Kytia. I want to say Kytia is how she pronounces her name. And John, they actually sat down in front of Seals and asked her why she believes what she believes. And you know what they did? They listened. Neither one agreed with her, but they listened. And I thought that was highly encouraging. That to me made up for all the lowlights. And then it ended on a high note with Seals and John coming back and Seals and John coming to an agreement about their belief about something. And John's argument to Seal, because at the very end of the debate, one of the debaters comes back and gets to debate for about 10 minutes about what they believe. And then the person who was the one figure, they go through that debate with them. And John comes back and says he believes that black folks should leave the Democratic Party. And Seals agreed. And they had a pretty interesting exchange about it. But they even wound up high-fiving each other at the end. Why is this such a big deal? I think there's a big deal because in the political climate that we have right now, divide and conquer is the main tool. And to see that you had these black folks who disagreed with each other quite a bit actually give each other respect. I mean, like there was only one who I thought was just flat out disrespectful. But the rest of them, even another one who came up and he tried to do his best conservative commentator, impression. I forgot the guy's name, but he did his best. They actually got to a point where they all seemed to have some level of respect for one another, and there was a sense of a weird sense of community that happened at the end of it. And I know Seals herself probably couldn't wait to get out of there, and I'm wondering if she at least followed up with one or two of them. I'm hoping that she did. Like the sister Jazz, she and Jazz went at it a lot, but I think she and Jazz there's a connection between the two of them. This is not what the hostile environment that we're living in right now. This is not what they want. What they want is flat out hate. They want Seals to say, I said what I said. They want the 20 black conservatives to say, I said what I said. And they want them to part ways and never speak again. So I think what happened was actually a good thing. And I will say this, that I think that there are 4 things that we need to do to really put the pressure on to, I want to say to help educate black conservatives a little bit more about empathy, because I think one of their issues is that they lack empathy big time. I don't want them to change their politics. I want them to change their attitude. They can have their politics. It's fine. But I think the most important thing is for them to change their attitude. And there are 4 things that we can do. And even if it's not directed at black conservatives, black folks who are on the fence, who refuse to vote, who refuse to, get engaged in a political process, here are my 4 things. Number 1, we really need to find on social media. And by the way, social media is the weapon here. There's the weapon of choice for me. We need to find on social media as many black scholars as we can, especially black folks who are versed in sociology. This is important because a lot of what these folks were lacking was a solid black sociological perspective. We need to amplify the voices of black scholars, especially sociologists and others in the social sciences. Speaking of social sciences, we need to get on the social media and get our butts back into critical race theory. We let them take it away from us. And by the way, critical race theory, when I talk about it, if you're watching the video, get it from the source, the people who actually wrote about it. There's a book that we have in the Francis household, Critical Race Theory, the key writings that formed the movement. And Kimberly Crenshaw was one of the editors on this, Neil Gotanda, Kendall Thomas, and Gary Peller. And so getting into it and actually amplifying the voices of the people who wrote this stuff is what needs to happen. And then while we're at it, citing relevant, credible sources in all discussions. In all discussions. Find it before you write it. Find it before you post it and know the context of it. And then the other thing is, and this is going to sound, I'm sure we've said this a bunch of times, and if you say it, don't say duh to me, but push critical thinking. Push critical thinking. There is an episode that I did on this show specifically on critical thinking. Check it out. I actually had a woman by the name of Dr. Asha Lovrich, who is in Croatia and constantly posts about critical thinking on threads. We've got to push it, especially the reality that all things can be true. There's a whole lot of either or in our discourse right now. It's either this way or it's either that way. And pushing that all things can be true can help spark more critical thinking. By the way, I did a go forward message about all things being true, and check that out on YouTube. Hashtag the way forward WBOK. And the final thing is this: the final place that we can go from here to help spark healthy conversations, specifically in the Black community, regardless of our political or social perspectives, is hold the line on civil discourse with one another. The ones who are willing to engage in civil discourse, hold the line. Coming up next, the Go Forward message. I'm Eddie Francis. This is The Way Forward on WBOK, what New Orleans is talking about.